What do you do after the release of a behemoth of a film like Scream? Well, you just dust off a script that the same writer wrote prior to Scream but never got its chance to go into production. It's not outlandish to say that Kevin Williamson was one of the most influential people in film in the 90s, largely due to his ability to write tight scripts with great twists, and tantamount to that was his signature meta self-awareness that was so prevalent in his scripts. All while dressing the movies with young, hip teens that were always fun and smart, since for the most part, the characters always had a keenness of understanding what logically shouldn't be done, even if they end up doing those things anyway. Not only does it carry a similar tone, but you obviously feel that Kevin Williamson's style of writing throughout the film. To be candid, this franchise was never really a favorite of mine. Growing up, I liked the original well enough, and Jennifer Love Hewitt is amazing of course, but the other entries really didn't have that much rewatch value to me, and it's probably because those sequels always muddied my viewing of the franchise, because wow, those sequels are awful. Why do we have actual ghosts in this franchise? There is no need. And that's a byproduct of the supernatural fad that became popularized in the early 2000s, but still. The original to me is its own isolated thing. It's a solid as hell movie with great performances, and it encapsulates the 90s aesthetic very well. Fundamentally, this story stands out among other entries of its time because the story is actually compelling. Most movies that came out during the 80s and 90s, which this movie is very clearly trying to emulate that 80s slasher aesthetic, they were always focused on how iconic can we make the killer, or the kills themselves have to be awesome at the cost of the story and characters being extremely weak. Relationships very tenuous at best, and that was fine since that was what people wanted at that time. Obviously there's always exceptions, but generally speaking that was the case. And it's not a convoluted premise either. If anything, it's simple, and that's what makes it work so well. After a bunch of normal high school kids make a reckless mistake, they form a pact to try and erase their mistake, but end up having to deal with the repercussions of said actions a year later when they start getting anonymous notes informing them that someone knows what they did last summer. It's a cute story of morality and even serves as a positive message in a way, since you could chalk it up to just the movie saying own up to your mistakes, because no matter how much you want to hide it, the truth will always come out. And the character dynamics are exactly what you would expect, since each character has that formulaic stereotype role. You have the good girl, final girl, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, which is just incredible. She ends up feeling a little out of the orbit of the ultimate final girls like Lori, Nancy, and Sydney, but at the minimum her yells should be in the same bracket since it's truly glass shattering.
What are you waiting for, huh?
And Jennifer brings a lot of nuance to her character because she works through her problems and she faces each oncoming challenge with a fierceness that's admirable. Freddie always plays the charming boyfriend, Sarah Michelle Gellar is adorable as she's the failed model, which is hilarious, and in the same year had her big break. And just seeing her with Freddie Prinze Jr. in retrospect is so fun since they're at each other's throats in the film, and it's just bizarre knowing the trajectory of the real life actors. You have the jerk that manipulates the situation to where obviously everyone inevitably acquiesces to the pact. And I love that the movie challenges you to question whether or not these characters deserve what they get, if they should reap what they've sown. The movie does a great job of staying in that gray area while also constantly making every character a potential suspect. Because as much as this is a slasher, it's also a mystery, and a good one at that. At one point or another, each character is a possible suspect, and the red herrings serve as good fake-outs as well. Obviously it's not on the same level of a whodunit as Scream, but it stands as its own thing. Another thing definitely worth mentioning is it's a fun movie. That car action sequence with Barry is really tension-filled, and a bit silly but needed for the sequence to not feel so bleak or dark. I think Helen's scene was so stressful and it was such a memorable chase sequence because it proved how tenacious she was. And she really did put up a hell of a fight. And in terms of pacing and atmosphere, the movie is always engaging and keeps you entertained. Kevin Williamson is really good at having a consistent feel of paranoia in his scripts. Each character is constantly stressed and is always having to look over their shoulders, and in a murder mystery movie, that's exactly what you want. These guilt-ridden characters feel realistic in that sense. And of course, the franchise ended up making an icon out of its killer. The fisherman with the hook is well regarded as being a cool killer, and really, he's not even that much on screen, and yet his presence is constantly felt. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of his look per se. It's minimalistic, it's clean, but it's just not super memorable. That's saying something when my favorite killer is a guy in a jumpsuit. Nevertheless, I can appreciate the fisherman killer's design design. I really wish they would have kept him as this grounded villain, but whatever. And of course you have the signature hook, which is simple, it's effective, and shockingly rare. The movie isn't without flaws though. One of the things I still to this day can't wrap my head around is why did they gloss over the trauma and grief these characters certainly went through? You get like the Spark Notes rundown on each of them after the year break happened, and then immediately it goes into the discovery and investigation stage. It's so bizarre because I know the movie is a tight 90 minutes, but I'm of the opinion that it should have spent a little longer expounding and breathing with the characters to show the indirect damage that this traumatic experience left on them. The characters are tethered by force, and you don't really feel that resentment that they probably would have towards each other outside of Rey. Also, I know the intention was to emulate the 80s, which for the most part it did, but the kills, which is literally the most significant element of that era, were pretty dull. Generally speaking, most kills that came out of the 90s were not great because CGI was still working out its kinks, and no longer was it necessary to have everything practical. Outside of Leonard's kill, which was awesome, the rest were just whatever. There's great elements in I Know What You Did Last Summer, but the ending is such a bummer. It's way too convoluted and unnecessarily complicated. For a movie that thrives on a simple premise, I can never get past the fact that the movie went to those lengths just to surprise the audience. Nevertheless, while it's certainly not one of my favorites, it's a solid little movie that succeeds at what it sets out to do. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.